Hi, everybody, and thanks for coming to this session where I'm going to show you an introduction to Visual SQL. My name is Dave Fowler. I'm the founder and CEO of Chartio, here to talk to you about a product we built called Visual SQL. So we basically made SQL a visual version of it, just like DOS made Windows made DOS visual. So way more people could use computers. We've done a very similar thing with SQL. Only about 50% of developers even know how to use SQL. It's not hard to learn, but if the world was going to learn it, they would have done it by now. It's been out for a really long time. And so we are obsessed with making that a reality. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself. A little background more on me. I am the founder and CEO of Chartio. I started Chartio about 10 years ago now. We're close to our 10-year anniversary. And we are obsessed with the mission, the very straightforward mission to enable anyone, not just data teams, to work with and explore and understand their own data. So Excel has been out for 38 years now, and it's a great program. Anyone can work with data in Excel. As soon as data gets bigger than a spreadsheet, and all of a sudden you have to start using databases and storing it in other systems, then you have to learn SQL. Or become a data analyst and learn complex BI products. So it's really locked down for other people to explore and understand. There's a lot of challenges in solving that. A lot of people have been trying to solve it for a long time. And we are a company just fully dedicated to the mission of doing that. Can we make it as easy as Excel is to use, but for people to explore bigger sets of data, things that are bigger than a spreadsheet? So with that effort, we really looked at a lot of different landscape things. Looked at SQL. SQL is the most powerful way to work with data. It's the language of data. It's what it's written in. I love SQL. It's a favorite language. I've written several Postgres SQL tutorials. You can go to dataschool.com, and we have a free online SQL tutorial we wrote there, as well as even another ebook on how to teach other people SQL. And SQL is really, really powerful for fetching data, but it's not a great way to explore data. It's not quite fast enough to explore. Wanting to change the date range, or wanting to change another group by that you want to do, or change really just anything in SQL takes a bit of time. You end up having to repeat yourself a few times. You end up having to Google that date format again, and remembering the different dialects. If you're using more than just Postgres, if you're using other SQL, they're all a little bit different. And so remembering all the details of each of those, remembering all the different functions, is a lot to remember and Google and find. And it's just like the ease which you can go through. You're not really browsing, you're not really exploring. You're kind of questioning, and it's very powerful, but it's not great for that speed to insight. And also, it's just too intimidating in text-based for business users to pick up. I've taught a lot of business users SQL. They can learn it if they're really focused. It's not all that hard, but they just don't. Like I said earlier, if they were going to learn SQL, they would have done it by now. It's a really valuable skill to learn, but a very low percentage of the population actually knows SQL and actually can go and write these queries and answer questions themselves. So that's one way to go fetch data in a bigger data set than Excel, is to learn SQL. But there are a lot of pros, but some cons to SQL as well, especially for data analytics. So a lot of people have tried to solve this in other ways, using traditional BI solutions, things like Tableau, and they're kind of this interface on top, a drag and drop UI to query and explore data. Because data is so complex, because you export in such, you need to explore it in such flexible ways. It's really hard to make a general product that can query it. And so you end up with pretty monolithic tools. We call Tableau the Photoshop of charting. It's fantastic, but it really requires quite a learning curve. It requires, a lot of education, sometimes even a degree, to really learn it. And still, this isn't very accessible to people outside of the professionals who are going to use it all day and every day. And it's not near as flexible as SQL. So that's one answer to this. And it's, if this was going to work, it probably would have by now as well. Still, again, we really have this problem that the vast majority, 95 to 99% of a company can't access or query their data. And that's more and more increasingly important for businesses. So even with these BI products, it's just fallen short, especially with the complexities of relationships, complex data schemas, et cetera, et cetera. So it adds extra layers to the stack. So at Chartio, we really want to solve this problem. And we did a bunch of user tests. We tested ourselves, our old version of product, and we tested our competitive product set as well. And we found some good news and bad news. The good news was that, like we got awarded, we have the highest usability. So we were the easiest to use of all of our competitors. The bad news was still only 1 in 10 people that we handed the product to could explore and query the data. Now, these are people, we kind of preface, we only user tested people, tested hundreds. We only user tested people who said they were good at Excel. So that's kind of the requirement. If they're good at Excel, still only 1 in 10 could use a BI product. And we realized very quickly with a lot of videos recorded on these people, that is terrible. That initial experience, there's a huge learning curve, and we needed to really solve it. And another insight we found that even less people, so of that group, we also were wondering what % of them knew SQL or could just go into a SQL mode and type in SQL. Even less people than that 1 in 10 could do that. And so this is a conference, this is a community of like a lot of people who know SQL, and they're like, oh, this isn't a big deal. I know SQL. But if you don't want to be the only person who's writing SQL for your whole organization, if you want others to be able to have access, and it kind of sucks to be that bottleneck. Obviously, something that really enables other people to would be great. Also, when we focus on this, we really think about the power users as well. We really think, making it faster and easier and more intuitive to explore and write SQL in a visual way is also really great for power users too. It makes them more effective. So again, with the analogy of when Windows made DOS more visual, we're trying to do the same thing. And there are still a lot of opportunities to go into the terminal. And that can be a very powerful user space. But even as professionals, even as developers, even as engineers in IT and DBAs, we mostly stick in the visual aspects of our operating systems today, and we feel the future will be the same with data. So what we did, we saw that 1 in 10 number after hundreds of user tests, and we said that's not good enough. And so we started with lots of Figma designs. We designed a whole bunch of different versions, different approaches. How can we make this more intuitive? We knew from the user tests there were really intimidating things about BI products that come in. One of the first things you see is it asks you, what's the difference between dimensions and measures? And that didn't, people got really confused by that. Right away, you have to think about not just what data you want to explore, but you have to think about, should it be a dimension or a measure? Some other products call it rows and columns, or Power BI calls it groups and values. And so we were like, people get really stuck there, and understandably. And so we tried a whole bunch of different ways of getting around this. And then we went back to user tests. We used usertesting.com, and we tested just people, person after person after person, with this prototype that took us months to build. And we did dozens of iterations of this, and it wasn't working. It wasn't working at all. After many months, we were still at this 1 in 10 number, and I'm telling you, it was kind of a nightmare. I really thought that instead of solving this problem, I might have just proven to myself that business users will never explore data themselves, that there is no such interface that will allow them to do so. And the entire mission of our company, I was like, oh no, I might have just disproven the thesis of the company. Luckily for me, when we were down to the very end, literally our last ideas, and we got that prototype out the door and sent it out to people. All of a sudden, 6 came back. We were very excited. 6 in 10 people could explore it. We did a few more iterations later, and we got to here. 8 in 10 people could use Visual SQL. That's what we call our new product, Visual SQL. And so we were delighted there. We really finally, like, all these things that come together, we got over that learning curve so people could explore and understand it themselves. Pretty big breakthrough. Very excited about that. 8 times more usable than any other product on the market. And something that we felt really does jump that chasm into, so that people in sales, people in marketing, people in support, people in product can write their own queries in a visual way they can understand and get the results that they need. So this is a little bit of a demo of what Visual SQL is. And actually, I can go into a screen share and show this a lot better. So I'm just going to do that now and show you what we did create. A lot of you are probably wondering, okay, let me see it. So let me share the screen now. This is the homepage of Chartio. It's got a bunch of dashboards that we've had created here, and you can go into and explore any of them. They're all kind of interactive, and you can rearrange them, you can edit them, you can add comments and have discussions on them. But we're not going to go into the dashboard today. Really, I want to stick to the Visual SQL, so that's in our Explore tab here. And the first thing you do is choose what database you want. So we work really well and across all data sources. So if you've got Postgres, obviously, Redshift, MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, Snowflake, BigQuery, all kinds of different databases we support. And what's nice is Visual SQL writes in each of these dialects, so you don't have to remember when you're switching between, like, what is that function name again in this version of SQL? So it just does that automatically. So I'm going to choose here to look at this demo data here in a Postgres database, and it is a sample company that's a clone of DocuSign, so any e-signature company. The next thing you do is come in here and add and choose columns that you want to explore. And so we've got here a documents table, and then here are the columns inside the documents table. We've got an invoice table, organizations, all kinds of different data. So one thing that's really different and a big innovation about the Visual SQL is that most other BI products and interfaces here do show you a list of the tables and the columns. But we really found in a lot of user tests that users get very confused by the columns. They don't know what is status, what are the different statuses, and what are the different types again? What does that even mean? Is that even filled out? Is it a blank column? Is it what's there? And so we found also this isn't very intuitive that these are columns. People don't really know that right away, especially if they're not experienced in a product like this. And so we found that if we actually show the first 10 rows of a column, of a table, and show the columns in this kind of Excel way, this is very intuitive to people. Oh, I get this is a documents table, and there's these columns, and oh, that's what the statuses are. There's signed and prepared and unsigned. And oh, okay, the types are the types of documents that are uploaded. There's looks like a few different types here. That makes sense. People get it and are intuitive. And so you can either click over here, click create a date, or the next column you can click over here, and that's how you choose columns. And a nice thing we also realized other products make you choose right away whether you're going to use rows or columns, or whether you're going to do measures and dimensions, or groups and values is what Power BI calls them. So we don't make you choose that. We auto suggest right here. We think based on 90, we get it right about 90% of the time, and it's really easy to change too. So we see we're suggesting you probably want to see this by day. You probably want to do a count distinct of the ID, and it shows you some sample results that might come out of this. It's not the real results, but it kind of gives you an idea of the structure. And I don't want it by day. I'm going to do it by week. I'm going to run that query. And yeah, if it's not exactly right, if that's not the way you want it, actually, let's go back today. You can go change that really easily. Now, if you were doing this in SQL and you want to switch from day to week, I still don't have them memorized. You often have to go do that Google search. What's the date format in this dialect again? How do you do that date truncate thingy? That's almost always a Google search for me. I don't know if anybody else is like that, but we can really, really seamlessly change it over here. So let's go in and look at what happened under the hood. We can go to the advanced mode and see, yep, here's the SQL that it wrote on our behalf. And it did do this date format, and here's the month. Now, if I change it to week, if I change any of these aggregation points, it changes that SQL query for me automatically. If I change, which is really nice here too, I'm gonna not get the count of document IDs. I'm gonna go into the events table, see how many events are done. And so to get to the events table, I have to do 2 joins. And it did those joins automatically for me. It just wrote that SQL for me automatically. Really, really nice to be able to go into that. Now, a lot of you are SQL Power users, and you're like, well, I just feel comfortable in SQL. I just like writing SQL. We love that. I fully agree with you in a lot of cases. And so you can go at any time and go into SQL mode. And you can edit this to your heart's content. I'm going to say this count divided by 12 and hit run that query. So I can edit this column. I can start from scratch and just copy paste my SQL commands in here. I can do any of that. But what's really nice is being able to have this, the Visual SQL kind of did a lot of the heavy lifting for me. It did the join already. It selected the columns I want. It got the date formats right. Really, really nice that I didn't have to type that all out. So going back to the visual mode, and we're going to start looking down here at the results table. So we've already done a couple things, like we've changed the week and the date formats. We can obviously change the aggregation too. Maybe I want a total sum instead of just a count. This one's taking a little longer because we're querying all the events table now, but it's still pretty responsive and it's all cached as well. And now we can start adding things to this. So this whole bottom area of the results table, it's kind of meant to feel like you have Excel pasted at the bottom of your screen. And it gives you a lot of the same functionality and power here. So we can add a new calculated column. We can group, we can zero, we can filter, we can limit rows, we can unpivot, we can add other queries. I'll get into that in a minute. But let's do one thing here where I'm going to actually I'm going to add a calculated column. And this one I'm going to make just like a moving average of the ID column. And it's a, what do we got, week, 4-week moving average. And I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to rename this column to be moving average. And there, it shows that moving average very nicely in the results set up here in that chart. I can also here rearrange these, so I can reorder columns. Just drag and put this one last. It's going to change the color switching here for us. Obviously, maybe I shouldn't call it ID. I should call this number of documents. And very nice. So if you've noticed up here, we've created a trail behind us. This is our pipeline. We've created a whole bunch of different steps based on the things we just did in our results table here. And again, to mimic SQL, and the reason we call it Visual SQL, it really is a visual version of it. And to be a visual query language, we have to be very flexible. And so this is how we get that flexibility. There's a series of steps, and you can walk through them and see way back here, we hadn't added a custom column yet. Here, we added it. Here in this next one, we renamed it. And then we reordered, and now we renamed again. And so all these steps that you can go through and grab that data set. So I'm going to actually go here and remove, I'm going to remove this one and remove this one. And I'm just going to remove the custom columns. We're going to go back kind of to the start. Obviously, we don't want to do a reorder. And one of the most powerful features we can do here is to add another query. I'm going to add this query just to prove to you what we're doing here. I'm going to query from a totally different data source. This is actually querying directly from Google Analytics. And in Google Analytics, I can choose, here are all the different columns available to me. Here in sessions, we can do time. Obviously, we want time. And we want number of sessions. That sounds good. And we don't want day, so we want the same first column to be coming back. So I think the other one was by month we were at last. And I'm going to run this query and merge the results. This one not by day. Oops, by week. Sorry, we'll change it to month to be the same. We'll come back down and see. These are the two data sets next to each other. And what we can do is actually, we've done a join. It's an outer join. We're going to change that to be an inner join so that they overlap. And now I'm seeing the same date range. So again, this is a visual version of a join. Has all the same, outer, inner number of columns, all the same functionality, but a visual way of doing it. And now I'm going to add a calculated column just to get extra fancy here. I want to see the ratio of my conversion rate, something like a conversion rate, where I want to see how many new documents I get based on how many new website visits that I get, how many new web sessions. So I'm going to say number of docs divided by GA sessions. And I'm going to multiply by 100 here so we get a percent. That, and I'm going to rename to call this percent conversion. And so, yeah, I have this nice percent conversion score on there. The other data I don't need anymore. I just want to see the conversion. Oops. So I'm going to actually hit hide. And I'm going to hit hide. And now I just am seeing that ratio of the results. Really nice, really powerful functionality. I've just brought things, and so you can read it really easily too. We draw it out as best as we can here, showing you you've got one query from this Postgres data source. You rename the column, then we grab the data from Google Analytics, and we've done an inner join. And then we've done a few different manipulations here, making a new custom column. You can read what that custom column is. All very straightforward, and you can go back in time and actually look at these and edit the steps if we wanted to multiply it by 2. We could totally go ahead and do that. It's not going to change the shape. It's going to change the axis, though, as well. Then last, we can save these. We can save these as a data store. We can save it as an alert that sends you every day. But we're going to save it as a chart, and we'll call this ratio of docs. And I could change all kinds of other settings on this. We have all kinds of different chart types as well here on the right. But we're going to save just this, and I'll save it. Doesn't matter which one I save it to. Let's save it to a dashboard, and you can arrange it and put it anywhere you want and size it however you want. So that's the end result with this Visual SQL. Very, very quick way for anybody in a company. Hopefully, 8 out of 10 people, again, that we tested can do this. It can make charts and dashboards themselves. It's super, super powerful for people in product, for people in support, for people in sales and marketing to be able to dig through, play with this. And it's really easy to go also, someone else to come in and say, oh, what is this chart about? What is this data? And have a very visual representation. Oh, that's what that did. Okay, that kind of makes sense. Or actually, this is wrong. This custom formula is not quite, for some reason, they divide by 2, and that's not right. So very easy. And also for things like that, we have comments. So you can also ask, like, I don't think this is right. So all kinds of nice tooling around the results set that you get, obviously, of the Visual SQL. So I'll stop screen sharing there and finish up the rest of my slides, we just kind of just went over Visual SQL. But there's all kinds of benefits to Visual SQL, both for business users, obviously, and then we really hope it to be enabling for power users, such as who this audience mostly is. Again, making it just much faster for you to write queries, much more powerful, and for you to really extend it to not have to remember all the dialects, and to be able to merge data from multiple different sources. Sometimes it's great to just do that on the database level or bring all those data sets together. But the real reality is that things aren't always perfect that way. Things aren't always in the same spot when you want them to be or need them to be. So we work with you in a very agile way. So yeah, that's Visual SQL. We think the future of exploring data and working with data is visual. Just like operating systems aren't still text-based; they're very visual, and it really enables way more people to work on it. And even power users are much more empowered. We think that same is true of SQL. It shouldn't just be text-based anymore. We should have a visual version. That's what we've created. I'd love to talk to any of you about it if you've had luck with it, or if you want to try it, or if you have other ideas. If you've had luck with business users using data, we would love to hear. So I'm Dave@chartio.com. Email me anytime. Happy to get to know you. And we're going to open it up here for some Q&A.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so as mentioned, we are now going to head into the Q&A section. So we're going to pose a couple of questions that came out early on in the talk, and then we'll jump through a couple others if we have the time. The first question that was asked was, when you're using Chartio, or when you're using this, what is the type of SQL that is generated? Does it work with different SQL dialects?
Yeah, great question, and thanks, Jamie. Visual SQL, one of the great things about it is it writes to multiple different dialects. So, of course, like Postgres was actually the first database we really tested and built it on. But it works for MySQL, it works for Redshift, it works for Snowflake, it works for BigQuery, it even works for Google Analytics, and so many other SQL dialects. We just are about to launch a Spark connector. So it really works across SQL languages, and I think that's one of the big benefits. There's many benefits to it, but one of the big ones is you only have to remember kind of one dialect, and it works for all of it. So the visual interface works for all of it, and you can actually switch at any time and go into that SQL mode and actually look at the text that it generates, and alter that if you want. And the nice thing is, if you're not used to one dialect or another, you can kind of start with that visual and see how it's writing it for you and learn that dialect. Another great benefit people have found is when they switch databases, actually, and we help them migrate from, some people migrate maybe from Redshift to Snowflake or something like that, or from MySQL to Postgres. We're able to actually rewrite all the visual SQL queries, and it remaps it, so it will rewrite it to that different dialect, and it's like a very powerful thing to be able to do that.
So you're actually able to see the SQL it generates as well?
Exactly, and you're able to edit it. So a lot of people, especially power users, still kind of even if they know eventually there's something crazy extreme they want to do in a really powerful SQL command, they'll often start by just in visual mode, like picking the columns they want, and then it does the join automatically. It does the data aggregation automatically. It does all these things that a lot of the setup work, and then it starts you off with largely the query that you want, and you can go in and tweak it from that point. It's just much faster than typing all that out.
So that kind of answers one of the other questions we had, which was, how is it better than writing the SQL itself? And it sounds like it's effectively a lot faster and takes a lot of the middle operations out. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, we really keep in mind, in our mission and goal is to make it so business users can write queries, right? And that's kind of the main objective. But by keeping that in mind, it's also better for power users as well. There's just all kinds of benefits to it being visual. The analogy that we use a lot is like Windows and DOS. And when Windows and now OS 10, made the terminal visual, it's not just business users use that. Now, power users use it as well. It's like, it's kind of rare that you go down into the terminal only for really needed things. But the most of the time you spend on your computer is in a visual way. We think that that's the future of data as well, that most of the time you'll be querying in a very visual way. There's a lot of benefits to that. But it's really nice to still be able to go down to that terminal, still go down to the text mode when you need to.
So does this sort of eliminate the hurdle that we've seen growing over the last, say, 10 or 15 years, where a lot of business users and analysts have kind of started digging deeper and deeper into learning SQL itself, and it allows them to kind of get to their business conclusions in a more rapid way? Does it replace that, or does it really just allow them to bolster things which they may not be strong on, and allow them to dive deep if they have that desire?
Yeah, exactly. So, everybody's been realizing, like, I need more access to data. And I've seen so many great companies really try to get the whole company data literate, because the more informed everybody is, the better. And so I've seen, like, Facebook and Airbnb, they have just huge SQL classes for everyone across the company. And it's hard to learn that stuff. It's hard to remember all the SQL dialects. It's not that hard. SQL's pretty easy to learn, but I think for a business user, just remembering it all, feeling confident in it, it's pretty intimidating. And it's just not a great way to explore data. And it's something that if you don't keep up your chops, if you're not doing it, a couple times a week, it's really easy to lose that skill set and lose the confidence in it. So we just want to make that, like, way, way easier for everybody to do. And we think it's so important for the people. We kind of say there's two types of people in a company. There's people who know the context of the business, and then there's of the data. And then there's people who know the tech of the data. And how do we kind of bring those two together as much as possible? And there's kind of two approaches. You could either teach all the data analysts and the data engineers everything about marketing or everything about sales, or you really do what you can to help those business users, be able to access and explore the data themselves. And that's what we're focusing on. We think that's a little bit more of a realistic problem.
Okay, great. One question that was asked is, how does Visual SQL compare with other tools like Power BI and Looker?
Yeah, so those are fantastic BI products, and we also are in that category of a BI product. So you can actually go to G2 Crowd and see how we compare and rate against those guys. We continually win the award for the most usable product and the fastest time to value. And a big difference between us and them. There's many, but our Visual SQL is just a big differentiator, and we're not kind of like an application that's allowing you to explore one table at a time. We're really like this flexible language that allows people to explore an entire schema. And so in those other ones like Looker, you have to have a LookML where you say this is a table that someone can explore, but it has to be joined in the right way. All the right columns have to be there. So you're really kind of putting people on rails, and the ultimate result of that is people have to come back often and say, actually, could you add this column to it? Could you give me another data set where that info is joined with a different data set? And you end up with a whole huge list of these different tables that people can explore. People call them explorers in Looker. But with Chartio, you just have the schema, and we do encourage people to make a data warehouse, a single source of truth, and also maybe marks for different teams. But you're able to, the users are able to have that full power of SQL, to have the ability to join across data sets and to do whatever aggregation they want to do that data set, rather than rely on someone else to do that for them.
Now, I want to key up on something a minute ago around the flexibility. So we've talked a bit about the Postgres side of things. Certainly, obviously, where we're focused on vision, that's fairly self-evident. What other data sources does it actually work with beside Postgres? It looks as though it's a pretty wide spate, but I figured it's a good question to pose.
Yeah, I mean, I think we connect to and write the SQL dialect of pretty much every relational database, even some non-mainstream ones. We've even got Presto connectors for Hadoop, and we've got Spark connectors. And then, we even have one for Google Analytics that actually writes the API code. And then we work through partners, and we're even building more and more of that in to get kind of your cloud data sources as well, to get your Salesforce, Marketo or your HubSpot, like those data sources imported in. And so, what we have people do is actually import them into something like Enterprise DB and into a warehouse where they can explore that in SQL itself. So because those APIs aren't powerful enough to really query with the full power that you really want in a product like Chartio.
Right. That makes perfect sense. And that actually tails into the for one of our other questions, which was whether or not you have accessibility for various systems like either QuickBooks or Salesforce. It sounds like the method is to encourage them to pull the data down and then interact with it via whether a Postgres estate or other. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Another fantastic part about how we do, so it is nice when you put it all into one data source. That's a little bit idealistic, though. A lot of companies aren't working that way quite yet, or you're at a different stage, or you just got a new data source. So we also, Visual SQL works across multiple databases, which is really awesome. So you can query from your Enterprise DB, your Postgres, and then you can query from MySQL or Redshift, and then merge those results together. And then our Visual SQL also continues as a language, so you can do another step where you divide column A by column B and make a new column that's the ratio. You can also pull from, like I said, Google Analytics and get like what's your conversion ratio to signups on your website. And that's really, really powerful to be able to do in a very agile way. And Visual SQL does a really nice job of connecting to all those different types of data sources when your data is not all in one spot.
Okay, fantastic. One question that kind of suits to the roll-up of everything that we've talked about and the potency of the platform. How's the response been to Visual SQL since it's been launched?
Yeah, it's been really phenomenal. We had on our launch day, over a month worth of signups just like signed up that day. So we got a great response. We had a lot of chatter on the Hacker News community. People sharing their experiences. People really excited about what we built here. This was over a year in development, so it was a lot of work. And the response has continued to be great. Our activation rate, and that's what we call when people do sign up and they're able to make charts and dashboards, has more than doubled. And so people are really finding it easier to make charts and dashboards now. And so our number of charts per day is going up really high. Continues to go up, and we're continually make more and more improvements. We're still we just launched Visual SQL a few months ago. There's still a lot to do to make it kind of our ideal version. We're still doing a lot of user tests. We're still doing a lot of prototypes and testing things. So we have a lot of big plans for making it continually better. But already the adoption's been great. The response has been great. And it's really impacted our conversion rates in our business in a very positive way.
Okay. And in the few months since launch, as well as perhaps leading up to it, have you guys run into any limitations of Visual SQL? Is there anything that SQL can do that it yet cannot?
Yeah, there are. There's like a lot of things. They're not. It's not a one-to-one mapping. So we try to make it as much of a one-to-one mapping as possible, and we're working on doing that more. But there's a lot of things Visual SQL can do that SQL can't. And then there's a few things that are harder to do in SQL. So reasons that you have to go down into that SQL mode and not do it in a visual way. And some of those are like subqueries right now. We're still kind of figuring out how to do subqueries better in Visual SQL. That's not really a thing. You can do it. There's like workarounds, but it's not very easy and intuitive. We right now automatically do join paths for you. We like say, oh, those two tables, we know how they're joined. But when you want to change those join paths, we don't have a great interface yet. We're working on that now to improve that and to make it adjustable. And yeah, there's a few aggregation functions that you can't quite do with Visual SQL, but there's also a lot more you can do as well. So there's a little bit of trade-offs. It's a little bit apples and oranges. It's not a direct comparison back and forth. I think the bigger limitation that people end up having to go to SQL 1 for is that if they do want to do a subquery.
Okay, very good. Well, I think that pulls pretty much all of the questions that we had posed today. So I want to thank Dave and the Chartio team for the presentation. I personally learned a lot, and it sounds like from the questions we've had posed that people certainly were enthused by the content. Just a quick wrap up for everyone that's in the audience. The handouts, which were requested a couple times during the chat, will be available by the end of day for this session as well as any others. And if you guys have any questions, certainly you can feel free to reach out to the EDB team or post them here as we're closing up. And I want to just again thank Dave and the team and wish everyone a great day. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, James.